Hello, and welcome back to Speak English Daily.
Hi everyone, we are very happy to see you here today.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Speak English Daily. We're so happy you're here. Today we're talking about something small that can make a huge difference in your English. We are going to learn how to use connectors to make your conversations sound smoother and more natural.
I think this is one of the most useful topics for English learners. Many people study grammar and memorize vocabulary every day, but they still feel that their English sounds a little strange. Have you ever felt that way?
I know I have when I was learning another language. I knew many words, but when I spoke, every sentence felt separate. It was like putting puzzle pieces on a table without joining them together.
That's a great example. A lot of beginners speak like this. I got up early. I made breakfast. I studied English. I went to work. Every sentence is correct, but the conversation doesn't really flow.
It almost sounds like someone is reading a list instead of talking to a friend. There's nothing wrong with the sentences themselves. The problem is that the ideas aren't connected.
And that's where connectors come in. A connector is simply a word or phrase that joins one idea to another. It helps your listener understand how your thoughts are related.
Think about a bridge. If two towns are separated by a river, people need a bridge to travel between them. Connectors work in the same way. They build little bridges between your sentences.
I like that comparison. Without those bridges, your listener has to work harder to follow your conversation. With connectors, everything feels smoother and easier to understand.
Let's hear another example. Imagine I say, I was tired, I finished my homework, I watched a movie. You understand every sentence, but it doesn't sound very natural, does it?
Not really. It feels short and disconnected. Now imagine those same ideas joined together. Suddenly, the conversation sounds more relaxed, and the listener can follow your story much more easily.
That's why today's lesson is so important. We're not learning difficult grammar rules. We're learning how to connect our ideas so our English sounds more like real conversations.
And don't worry if some of today's connectors are new to you. We'll explain each one slowly, use simple examples, and practice them in everyday situations. By the end of this episode, you'll know when and how to use them.
Here's something interesting. Many learners think they need hundreds of advanced words to sound fluent, but sometimes learning a few useful connectors makes a bigger difference than learning 50 new vocabulary words.
I completely agree. If your ideas are connected well, people can follow your conversation much more easily. That's one reason fluent speakers sound so comfortable, even when they use simple vocabulary.
During this episode, we'll learn connectors that help us show different ideas, make comparisons, give examples, add information, and talk about choices. These are connectors you'll hear in everyday English.
We'll use real conversations instead of boring grammar exercises because that's the best way to remember them. As you listen, try to notice how each connector changes the relationship between two ideas.
Before we begin, let's remember 5 useful words from today's lesson: connect, idea, sentence, conversation, and natural. You'll hear them many times, so they'll become part of your everyday English.
By the end of this lesson, you'll see that speaking better English isn't only about learning more words, it's also about learning how to join your ideas together. Once you start doing that, your conversations will sound smoother, clearer, and much more natural. So let's begin our journey with the first connector.
So let's begin with one of the most common situations in English. Sometimes two ideas don't match. One thing happens, but another thing happens too. This is called expressing contrast, and it's something we do almost every day.
That's true. Think about your own conversations. Maybe you say, I was busy, but I called my friend. Or, it was cold, but we went for a walk. The word but is useful, and everyone should know it. However, English gives us more choices.
Nice! Did everyone hear that? Mike just used our first connector without making it sound like a grammar lesson. He said, however, English gives us more choices.
Good catch. That's because however is often used when we want to introduce a different or surprising idea. Listen to this. The restaurant looked expensive. However, the food was affordable. The second sentence changes what you might expect.
Here's another one. I wanted to sleep early. However, I stayed up to finish my book. It sounds a little more formal than but you'll hear it in conversations, podcasts, and even everyday writing.
Now let's move to still. I like this connector because it's very common in spoken English. Imagine it's raining outside. You look out the window and say, "It's raining, I'm still going for my morning walk."
I like that example because it shows determination. The weather isn't great, but your decision doesn't change. Here's another one. I'm feeling tired. I'm still going to study English for 30 minutes.
That's a great sentence every English learner should remember. We all have days when we're tired after work or school. Still, even a short study session can help you.
That's another great use of still. You placed it at the beginning of the sentence. Still, even a short study session can help. You'll hear native speakers use it in different positions, and both sound natural.
Now let's move to despite. Many learners think it's difficult, but it's easier than it looks. We use despite before a noun or an activity. Listen carefully. Despite the rain, we went to the park.
Or, despite my busy schedule, I called my grandparents. The first idea sounds like a problem, but the second idea tells us what happened anyway.
Here's another everyday example. Despite feeling tired, I finished my homework. The tiredness didn't stop the action.
Let's compare all three connectors with one situation. Imagine it's snowing outside. You could say, it's snowing, but we're going shopping. That's correct. You could also say, it's snowing, however, we're going shopping. Or, despite the snow, we're going shopping.
Each sentence is correct. The meaning is very similar, but the style changes a little. That's why learning different connectors makes your English more interesting.
Here's another situation. A university student doesn't have much money. Some people might think that means they can't enjoy life.
But listen to this. She doesn't have much money, however, she's very happy. Or, she doesn't have much money, still, she enjoys meeting her friends every weekend.
And you can also say, despite having very little money, she enjoys her life. 3 different connectors, 3 natural ways to express the same contrast.
The important thing isn't memorizing long grammar rules. It's noticing how these connectors help your ideas flow naturally from one sentence to the next.
Before we continue, we'd love to hear from our audience. Which connector do you already use? But, however, or still? Tell us in the comments and try writing one sentence. We always enjoy reading your examples.
Great job! You've just learned 3 useful connectors for expressing opposite ideas. In the next part of our conversation, we'll look at another connector that helps you talk about making better choices in everyday life.
That's a connector you'll probably use every single day because we're always making choices. Sometimes we pick one activity and leave another behind. That's when instead of becomes really useful.
I agree. It's a simple connector, but it helps you sound much more natural. We use instead of when we choose one thing and don't choose another. It's all about showing an alternative.
Let's start with something many of us can relate to. Imagine you have 30 minutes free after dinner. You could spend that time scrolling through social media, or you could open a book.
I might say, tonight I read a novel instead of scrolling through social media. One small connector tells the listener what I chose and what I didn't.
Here's another example. Instead of watching short videos before bed, I listened to relaxing music. That sounds very natural, and it's something people often talk about.
I like examples that are connected to daily habits because they're easy to remember. Your habit is something you do regularly. If you want to improve your life, you sometimes need to replace one habit with a better one.
That's a great word, Mike. Replace means taking one thing away and putting something else in its place. For example, I replaced sugary drinks with water. It's a small change, but it can become a healthy habit.
Speaking of healthy habits, here's another example. On sunny days, I walk to the supermarket instead of driving. I still arrive at the same place, but I make a different choice.
That's also a nice way to get a little exercise. Maybe the supermarket isn't too far away, so walking becomes a better decision than driving.
Exactly. Every day is full of little decisions. Some are important and some are very simple, but we can use instead of to talk about all of them.
Let's think about food. After a long day, ordering food is quick and easy. However, some people enjoy preparing a meal at home.
Then they could say, we cooked dinner instead of ordering food. That's short, clear, and easy to understand.
Or maybe someone wants to save money. They might say, I made coffee at home instead of buying one on my way to work. That's another everyday situation.
Now let's connect this to learning English because that's why many of our listeners are here. Imagine you have 1 free hour this evening. You have lots of options.
You could watch random videos online, or you could spend that hour learning something useful.
Right, so you could say, I studied English instead of watching random videos. It's a simple sentence, but it clearly explains your choice.
I like that because it reminds us that learning doesn't always depend on having more time. Sometimes it's about making a better choice with the time we already have.
That's a wonderful point. We can't always add extra hours to our day, but we can choose how we spend the hours we already have.
Let's practice together with a few quick examples. I listened to a podcast instead of turning on the television.
My friend rode his bicycle instead of taking the bus.
My sister wrote in her journal instead of playing games on her phone.
We stayed home instead of going to the shopping mall.
Can you hear the pattern? Every sentence shows one action replacing another. Once you understand that pattern, using instead of becomes much easier.
And don't worry if you make small mistakes at first. Every new expression takes practice. The more real-life sentences you make, the more natural this connector will feel.
So today we've learned that instead of helps us talk about choices, better habits, smart decisions, and replacing one action with another. It's a connector you'll hear in everyday conversations again and again.
We've looked at choosing reading over social media, walking over driving, cooking over ordering food, and studying English over watching random videos. Next, we'll learn another useful connector that helps us talk about situations where something happens only if a certain condition is met.
That brings us to another connector that you'll hear all the time in English. It's unless. At first, it may seem a little confusing, but once you understand the idea behind it, it's actually very easy to use.
I remember feeling confused by unless when I first learned it. Then someone gave me a simple explanation. They said, think of it as saying, if not. That made everything much clearer.
That's a helpful way to think about it. Let's use a real-life example. Imagine your bus arrives at 8 o'clock every morning. Your friend tells you, you'll miss the bus unless you leave now.
In other words, if you don't leave now, you'll miss the bus. The connector unless introduces a condition. One thing needs to happen so another problem doesn't happen.
Here's another situation that students know very well. A teacher says, don't forget your homework unless you want extra work tomorrow.
Or a parent might say, you won't find your notebook unless you clean your room. That sounds familiar to a lot of people.
It certainly does. Let's try another example. Imagine you're planning to go for a walk, but the weather looks uncertain.
You could say, I'm going outside unless it starts raining. So right now you're planning to go. The only thing that changes your plan is the rain.
That's a very natural sentence. Notice that unless tells us what could stop the action. Without that condition, the plan stays the same.
Now let's connect this idea to learning English. Many learners ask how they can become more confident when speaking.
The answer is usually quite simple. You won't improve unless you practice regularly. Reading one lesson every few weeks isn't enough.
That's true. Even 15 or 20 minutes a day can make a difference. You'll remember new words more easily unless you stop practicing for long periods.
Here's another sentence. You won't succeed unless you keep trying. I like this one because it doesn't only apply to English. It works for almost every goal in life.
That's right. Whether you're learning a language, playing a sport, or learning to cook, regular practice is important.
Let's do a quick speaking exercise together. I'll say the beginning of a sentence, and Mike will finish it naturally.
Sounds good.
You'll feel cold unless...
You wear a jacket.
You won't remember new vocabulary unless...
You practice using it.
You'll be late unless...
We leave in the next 5 minutes.
Great! Those examples are short, but they're the kind of sentences people use every day.
Here's one more word from today's vocabulary. Prepare. Imagine you have an English test tomorrow. You could say, I won't feel confident unless I prepare tonight.
That's an excellent example because preparation often leads to better results. The more you prepare, the more relaxed you'll feel.
There's another vocabulary word we wanted to include today, and that's promise. For example, a friend might say, I promise I'll help you unless something unexpected happens. The help is still coming, but there's one possible condition.
I like that example because it shows that unless doesn't always talk about problems. Sometimes it simply explains the one situation that could change a plan.
Before we move on, remember the key idea. Unless means there's one condition that must not happen. If that condition appears, the result changes.
Exactly. So today, you've learned how to use unless when talking about missing the bus, forgetting homework, going outside, preparing for something important, and practicing English every day.
You've now added another useful connector to your English toolkit. Next, we'll explore connectors that help you add extra information, making your conversations richer without repeating the simple word and again and again.
We've learned how to show contrast and conditions, and now it's time for another useful skill. Sometimes you want to add more information, but you don't want to keep saying and in every sentence.
That's a habit many learners have. They'll say, I work and I study and I exercise and I cook. It's correct, but after a while it starts to sound repetitive.
That's why today's connectors are so useful. We're going to look at as well as and in addition. They both help you add information, but they do it in a smoother way.
Let's begin with as well as. Imagine someone asks about your hobbies. You could say, I enjoy reading as well as playing football. Now you've mentioned two hobbies without simply joining them with and.
Here's one from my own daily routine. Every morning, I drink a glass of water as well as spend a few minutes planning my day. It sounds more natural than repeating the same connector every time.
I like talking about routines because everyone has one. For example, before work, I check my emails as well as read the news. Both activities are part of the same morning routine.
Let's move to healthy habits. Someone might say she eats plenty of vegetables as well as exercises 3 times a week. Those two habits work together to support a healthy lifestyle.
That's a great point. A healthy lifestyle doesn't usually depend on one good habit. It often includes several small activities that work together.
I noticed you used the word includes, and that's one of today's vocabulary words. For example, my weekend plan includes a long walk, some reading, and time with my family. Exactly. Now let's look at in addition. This connector usually introduces an extra piece of information. Listen to this. I finished my report. In addition, I helped my colleague with another project.
Here's another example. The hotel was clean. In addition, the staff were very friendly. The second sentence gives us more information about the same topic.
Let's connect this to English learning because that's what we're doing today. Imagine someone asks how you study English.
I could answer, I read short stories every evening. In addition, I listen to English podcasts while cooking dinner.
That's a wonderful learning plan. I might say, I practice speaking with a friend every weekend. In addition, I write a few sentences in English every night.
Can you hear how in addition introduces another useful activity? It tells the listener there's something more to share.
Now, let's compare the two connectors. If I'm talking about two hobbies, I could say, I enjoy painting as well as taking photographs. Those two activities belong in the same sentence.
But if you're giving more details, you might say, I enjoy painting. In addition, I visit local art exhibitions whenever I can. The second sentence adds another idea.
That's the difference. As well as connects ideas inside a sentence, while in addition often adds another sentence or another piece of information.
Let's finish with a quick practice. My evening routine includes reading.
As well as reviewing new vocabulary.
I go to the gym 3 times a week.
In addition, I try to take a short walk every evening.
Our English class includes speaking practice.
As well as listening activities.
I watch English movies on weekends.
In addition, I read one English article every morning.
Fantastic! Those examples sound natural, they're easy to remember, and they're useful in real conversations.
So today, you've learned two connectors that help you add information without saying and again and again. They make your speech more varied, more interesting, and easier to listen to.
In the next part of our conversation, we'll learn one final connector that's perfect when you want to explain an idea by giving a clear example from everyday life.
We've learned several connectors already, and each one has a different job. Our next connector is one you'll hear in conversations, presentations, podcasts, and even books. It's for instance.
I like this one because it helps people understand your ideas more clearly. Sometimes you make a general statement, but the listener wants to know what you mean. That's when for instance becomes very useful.
Exactly. Imagine I say, there are many ways to relax. That's true, but it's a very general idea. Now listen to this. There are many ways to relax. For instance, you can read a book, listen to music, or take a short walk.
See how much clearer that sounds? The listener doesn't have to guess anymore because you've given an example.
Let's use another topic. People often ask, how can I become a better English learner? There isn't only one answer.
Right. You could say, good learning habits are important. For instance, reviewing new vocabulary for 10 minutes every day can help you remember more words.
Here's another one. Practice is important. For instance, you can speak to yourself in English while cooking or getting ready in the morning. That's easy, and almost anyone can try it.
I actually do something similar. If I'm driving alone, I describe what I can see around me in English. It's a simple activity, but it's great speaking practice.
That's a perfect real-life example. It shows that you don't always need a classroom to improve your English.
Let's move to another topic. Everyone knows healthy food is important, but what does that really mean?
We can explain it with examples. Healthy food gives your body energy. For instance, fruit, vegetables, whole grains, and nuts are good choices.
That makes the idea much easier to understand. Without examples, people may imagine different things. With, for instance, your message becomes more specific.
The same connector works well when talking about hobbies. You might say, I enjoy creative activities. For instance, I like painting, photography, and gardening.
Or someone could say, my brother has several outdoor hobbies. For instance, he goes hiking, fishing, and cycling during the summer.
Notice that for instance doesn't change the meaning of the sentence. It simply helps the listener understand your idea better.
That's why it's such a useful connector. It works in so many different situations. Whether you're talking to a friend or giving a presentation, examples always make your message stronger.
Let's think about English learning one more time. Someone asks, how can I improve my listening skills?
You could answer, there are many ways to practice. For instance, you can listen to English podcasts while walking, cooking, or traveling to work.
And if someone asks why speaking practice matters, you might say, speaking helps build confidence. For instance, talking with a language partner helps you think in English instead of translating every sentence.
That's a great reason to practice regularly. Small activities repeated every day can make a big difference over time.
Let's do one final practice together. I'll say a general idea, and you'll give an example.
I'm ready.
There are many fun weekend activities.
For instance, you can visit a museum, have a picnic, or ride a bicycle.
There are many ways to remember new vocabulary.
For instance, you can write flashcards, keep a vocabulary notebook, or use new words in short conversations.
Excellent. Those examples fit the situation perfectly.
And that's the key. Whenever you want to make your explanation clearer, think about adding "for instance" followed by one or two real examples.
Now that we've learned all of today's connectors, let's stop thinking about grammar for a while. Imagine we're planning our weekend together. What are you thinking of doing?
I have a few ideas. I was planning to drive to a nearby lake. However, the weather forecast says it might rain on Saturday afternoon.
I saw that forecast too. Despite the chance of rain, I'd still like to spend some time outside. We could leave early in the morning and come back before the weather changes.
That sounds like a good plan. Still, we should have another idea ready just in case. Unless the forecast improves, we might need an indoor activity.
We could visit the city museum instead of going to the lake. I've wanted to see the new exhibition for weeks.
I'd enjoy that. We could have lunch together as well as spend a few hours looking around the museum. In addition, there's a small bookshop next door that I've never visited.
That already sounds like a fun day. For instance, we could each choose one English book and then talk about it over coffee.
I like that idea because we both enjoy reading. It's relaxing and it's also a great way to learn new vocabulary without feeling like we're studying.
Speaking of studying, we've talked a lot about learning English today. Do you think it's easier to stay motivated when you study with someone else?
I do. When I study alone, I sometimes lose focus. However, when I have a friend to practice with, I usually stay more consistent.
I'm the same. Despite having a busy schedule, I always try to make time for at least one English conversation every week.
That's a great habit. I listen to podcasts during my morning walk instead of checking my phone. It's a small change, but it helps me use my time better.
I should try that. In addition, we could send each other one new English sentence every evening. It would only take a minute.
That's a wonderful idea. Unless we're too busy one day, we could keep that habit going for a whole month.
I think we'd notice real progress. For instance, we'd probably become more confident using new vocabulary in everyday conversations.
Confidence grows little by little. People often expect big changes overnight. However, improvement usually comes from small daily habits.
That's true in other parts of life too. Finding a good work-life balance isn't always easy.
No, it isn't. I enjoy working hard. Still, I know I need time to relax and spend time with my family.
I feel the same way. Despite having lots of things to do, I always try to keep one evening free each week just to rest.
That's important. I used to answer work messages late at night instead of relaxing. After a while, I realized I needed better boundaries.
Sometimes taking care of yourself is the smartest decision. For instance, getting enough sleep can help you stay focused and productive the next day.
Absolutely. The same idea applies when we travel. Some people try to visit 10 places in one day. However, I prefer enjoying a few places without rushing.
Me too. As well as visiting famous attractions, I like walking through quiet neighborhoods and talking to local people.
Those conversations often become my favorite memories. In addition, they give me a chance to practice the local language whenever I can.
That's one reason I enjoy traveling so much. Every trip teaches you something new, even if your plans don't go perfectly.
And unless we try new experiences, we'll never discover what we're capable of. Whether we're learning English, planning a weekend, balancing work and life, or visiting a new country, these small choices shape our experiences.
I couldn't agree more. Today's conversation shows that connectors aren't just grammar words. They help our ideas flow naturally, making every story, plan, and conversation easier to follow and much more enjoyable to listen to. Now, we've reached the end of today's episode, and I hope you're already noticing something. We didn't just talk about connectors, we used them naturally throughout our conversations, just like people do in real life.
That's one of the best ways to learn. You hear a connector again and again in different situations, and after a while it starts to feel familiar. You stop translating it in your head and simply use it.
Was there a time when connectors changed the way you spoke English?
Definitely. When I first started learning English, I spoke in very short sentences. I'd say things like, I went to work, I came home, I cooked dinner, I watched TV. People understood me, however, my conversations didn't sound very smooth.
I think many of our listeners can relate to that.
Then I began paying attention to how fluent speakers connected their ideas. For instance, I noticed they didn't always use the word but or and. They had many different ways to move from one idea to another, and little by little I started doing the same.
And that's something anyone can do. You don't need perfect grammar before you start using connectors. You can begin with simple sentences and improve over time.
Exactly. Instead of trying to memorize 20 new connectors in one day, I focused on just a few. Once they became natural, I added another one.
I really like that learning method because it feels realistic. Many people try to memorize everything at once. However, that usually becomes stressful and they forget most of it a day later.
Small steps are much more effective. Despite making mistakes in the beginning, I kept practicing, and eventually those connectors became part of my everyday English.
Let's do a quick review together. If you want to show two opposite ideas, you can use however, still, or despite, depending on the sentence and what you want to express.
If you're choosing one thing over another, use instead of. You could read a book instead of spending an hour on your phone.
If you're talking about a condition, remember unless. For example, I won't forget today's lesson unless I stop practicing. The connector tells us what could change the result.
When you want to add another idea, you can use as well as or in addition. They help your conversation sound more varied without repeating the same simple connector over and over.
And when you want to make an idea clearer, use for instance. A good example often helps people understand your meaning much faster.
Here's one piece of advice before we finish. Tomorrow, don't try to use every connector you've learned today. Pick 2 or 3 and use them in real conversations.
That's a wonderful challenge. Maybe write 3 short sentences in English before you go to bed. Use however in one sentence, instead of in another, and for instance in the third. The next day, you can practice 3 different connectors.
After a week, you'll be surprised by how much more natural your English feels. Fluency isn't built in one afternoon. It grows through regular practice and small improvements.
And remember, don't be afraid of making mistakes. Every confident English speaker was once a beginner. The important thing is to keep speaking, keep listening, and keep learning.
We hope today's conversation has given you practical ideas that you can start using immediately. The more you connect your ideas, the easier your conversations become to follow.
Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. We always enjoy learning together with you, and we hope you'll practice these connectors in your own conversations this week.
Before we say goodbye, we'd love to hear from you. Which connector do you think you'll start using first in your daily English conversations? Leave your answer in the comments because we'd really enjoy reading your examples.
Keep practicing, stay curious, and remember that every conversation is another chance to grow.
Thanks for listening to Speak English Daily. Take care, keep speaking English every day, and we'll see you in the next episode.